What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/EntitledParents. This story's called Raised by an Entitled Parent to Be an Entitled Kid, Till I Decided to Own Myself. Not my story, but a friend whose childhood would fit as nicely into the sub as my own. We enjoy comparing parents, and I think he takes the cake on crazy. I got his permission to share some of his tales, in their words minus what grammar I did try to fix here and there when noticed. Obligatory English is my first language. Some details are left vague on purpose due to the nature of people being discussed, and privacy reasons and grammar and mistakes happen first post, so yeah! Okay, to start with, I've been a long-time lurker of Entitled Parents subreddits, and have given permission to a friend of mine to post this for me. And this is a bit of a story of me as an entitled kid, as some people refer to, being raised by an entitled parent, in this instance, a father. A bit of extra info to give context. My parents divorced when I was just a baby and had joint custody, allowing me to spend time with both parents. Both had very good jobs, and despite both being single parents, I'd say we were very well off, as in upper middle class, so we never really struggled financially. My mother, who is now the only parent still involved in my life, is a very sweet, extroverted woman who always tried to make me a decent person and essentially let me be myself and form my own identity. My father, however, to sum up some of his notable personality traits, was a very material-focused individual, seeming to believe lavishness and wealth bought happiness. He was also notably sexist, believing women were inferior even if they happened to have the same position, education, or job as him. He had a superiority complex as well as anger issues, and just was an all-around not-so-great person. I actually believe, now that I'm older and have been diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, and Asperger's, actually believe he may have had untreated depression based off seeing similar behaviors I had too before my treatment. But an added thing too is he didn't particularly accept those with mental issues that weren't him, so how could he accept that he might? I believe too, a lot of his behaviors came from being raised by his own father, who was a very devout German World War II vet who is also very clear as day still held on to the Nazi values, and clearly passed down a somewhat watered down version to my dad. Anyway, rather than cover a single event, as there are many, I'll cover the general growing up. Now, to explain my own behavior as an entitled kid. I wasn't one of those, "I want it, give it to me" kind. No, rather, I was one of those everything goes my way naturally cause I am great kind. I actually wasn't that horrible of a kid, but definitely had an air of entitlement to me. Had a view of work being beneath me and things will just work out for me cause they could. Admittedly too, I was quite spoiled, particularly by my father, who basically spent money quite lavishly on vacations all over the world for us to go on, getting me expensive things, etc. Sadly though, such things come with a price in its own right. In this instance, my personal freedom. I wasn't allowed to do anything my dad didn't approve of, or interact with anyone he didn't approve of. And I had to like everything he liked, and said vacations were also ridiculously planned down to a T. And due to his anger issues, if something went wrong or I did something to trigger him, I would be the target of his wrath during said vacation, or the poor staff. Back home, it wasn't any better. I had to be his little prodigal mini-me. So I literally only had things he liked or approved of to my name, from music to clothes, etc. Heck, I couldn't even watch TV shows I actually liked without his approval, and couldn't even use the internet at home if, say, I needed it for school. He used it for me while I watched as he sat in the chair and searched for info. And because I also grew up not being able to interact with anyone without his approval, I never really got to be a kid and interact with people or kids my age beyond schools, which ultimately made me develop really poor social skills since my father was pretty much the person I interacted with the most, and despite my mother's best efforts to remedy this when she got me on her days to see me, I never really did develop properly socially and got pretty horribly bullied, which admittedly I probably didn't help my own situation, and when my dad caught wind of this, it didn't help either. And actually, due to his freaking out at the school staff with his less than helpful anger, and even flipping the heck out of an elementary school kid on school property who was indeed one of my bullies, I pretty much was shunned and hated by my peers, and the school, I think, ultimately gave up on trying to help me. Education itself wasn't any better. Now, small humble brag, I actually am pretty smart and have even been tested to have a higher IQ than my father, something my father actually hated because, again, he had to be the superior one. While at first I was a lazy student who didn't really put in any effort because of my instilled mentality, which naturally got me in trouble with teachers and my dad because that's normal, when I actually did put in effort, anything below a B, no matter what the subject, was unacceptable. And putting forth effort was hard enough as I actually grew to really hate school as the bullying never stopped. And over time, I kinda lost faith in the educational system as I could come in black and blue and the school did nothing, while my dad's outbursts at the school did even less and made my situation worse. If I came home with a single C or a D on a report card or assignment, I was grounded for months. That's right, you heard me, months. Sure, he'd relent early, but the initial verbal abuse stuck with me for a long time. These groundings basically denied me what little freedoms and enjoyments I had at this place. While I was there, no gaming, no TV, no playing. Eventually, I learned to just lie and BS about my marks and assignments as logically the fallout was less and I kept my little freedom and enjoyments longer, and when my dad started punishing me by starving me on top of the groundings, it kinda became second nature. I even learned to hide food in my room so I could have something in my stomach when this happened. Eventually, I lost my freedoms further with the constant extra activities my dad put me in with the expectation to be the best, and even a tutor program, which even my tutors told him he should consider my educational problems being caused by something else and not the lack of understanding of the material. But of course, my dad didn't listen. Eventually, as I grew older, I became more self-aware, realizing that a lot of his efforts were to keep me away from my mother and make me his clone while also buying me in a way, while trying to sow distrust or disdain for my mother with the occasional negative words and comments. When I was in my early teens at this point, I had made friends to lessen the bullying over the years I was in school who were really around because I had access to money and things they were not able to get. I was in high school when I came back with a failing grade on a math test, easily my worst subject and always was my worst subject. He screamed and berated me and drove me all the way back to my mother's after I pointed out that he had told me to be honest about my grades after he caught me lying about them less than a month ago, and he would be understanding and help. I figured at the time I'd be honest and tell him, but oh boy was I wrong. The entire half-hour drive, I was in tears while I was told I was not his son, a failure, and a bunch of other cruel things along those lines, and that he was gonna leave me at my mother's after I grabbed the stuff he bought for me that were at my mother's because I was such a failure. Upon arriving at my mother's, I left a tear-filled message on the answering machine, letting her know I had to come home to pick things up. When I got back to my dad, he had calmed down again, but the damage was done and the message was sent. The next day, my mom took me from school and brought me to a counselor I was seeing who I just broke down and told everything to. Given my dad's history with my mother when they were married and the story I told them, me and my mother went into hiding while people tried talking with my dad to hopefully promote a healthy relationship with. My dad had been married to a woman who was my stepmother for a few years at this point, and never had an overly healthy relationship with me, a kid, being marriage counselor and mediator between them when they fought. I had thought that my stepmother would back me up during this whole ordeal, but she didn't. She lied to the counselors, denying the treatment of me, saying they never fought despite me even mentioning it to the workers playing mediator between me and my dad. And my dad even lied too. At this point, I was crushed, betrayed, and hurt, even more so because my dad was trying to convince me to meet him and stepmom alone without a worker or anyone to talk it out. Even going so far as get women from the rest of that side of the family to essentially call me and guilt me. At this point, I was done. I decided to take a stand for myself and I don't regret it to this day. I allowed my mother to take full custody of me at the time and hoped my dad would learn and realize what he's done. But no, he disowned me, and every big event or holiday, I'd get calls from the women of that side of the family to call and guilt me. I actually had suicidal thoughts as early as 4th grade because of everything I went through in school and home. And these kind of thoughts actually began to surface again. I even became numb to my own birthday with the guilt calls of them officially killing the personal value on my own date of birth. The man even drained a bank account of all my money because it was a joint account which he had control over, and because he never let me spend my own birthday money, that's where it ended up. So well over $2,000 of birthday money gone. Because he needed to pay for a ticket of mine for a trip I ultimately never went on after I left him, which I never had to pay before. The last time I saw the man was his final attempt to guilt me, bringing me all the possessions from my room, which I think he couldn't sell and figured would have some sentimental value to me, such as souvenirs from all our trips. He just up and left them at my mom's doorstep, which after talking with my mother, she allowed me to take a sledgehammer to them all in the backyard. There are many things I remember from him, like how he put my dog down behind my back without letting me say goodbye to her and telling me over the phone. She had cancer, so yeah, even I knew back then it was coming. To basically turning my room into a prison cell. While I am now much better off and can officially say I am my own person now, I can never forget the horrible experiences I went through. To those struggling and realize something is messed up, don't be stubborn and deny things. Tell someone and get help. And always be grateful that you have your own freedoms that make you your own person. And if you see someone who is going through a hard time, be there for them and don't add to their suffering. Even if they don't need you now, they very well might later. Good positive message that I stand by. You know, sometimes nothing can be more healing than just letting your feelings come out. Because, you know, bottling that stuff up inside is just not good for you. And I'm sure every one of us has learned that the hard way. Talking about it with someone who's willing to understand and support you is always good. And you know what? Even if they don't necessarily ask you for help, keep an eye out and, you know, occasionally ask how, you know, those close to you are doing. And don't just say, "How are you?" And they're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." No, you'd be like, "No, for real. Is everything okay? You need to talk about anything?" And if there's something going on, they might get emotional and they'll tell you, which is good. This story's called Entitled Mom Thinks I'm Seducing Her 13-Year-Old Son. So this story might not be as juicy as you guys are used to, but the circumstances make it so unbelievable it hurts. For context, this happened in the 6th grade, I believe. That makes me and the boys around 12 or 13. I have inherited not the best genes, so my boobs grew to be about a C or a D cup size at age 12. I was mainly friends with boys before because we played Minecraft together. But after my hormones kicked in, they started calling me names. They called my boobs udders and me a cow because I had udders. So one day I was finally fed up with the hurt, so I told my class teacher about it. She tolerated it for a couple of days, but when I told her like the 5th time, she finally said, "Okay, let's resolve this." She arranged a meeting for us and our parents to talk about it. Little did I know she was the worst teacher ever on the planet Earth. We get there with my mom, and the teacher gathers us all in the room, but sent the boys out. Then sits the mothers down next to each other and sends my mom to the back of the room. Then says, "OP, sit before the other mothers and talk it out." She really wanted me, a hurt 12-year-old, to talk my issues out with 3 protecting mothers. I started telling her what's been happening when one of the entitled mothers cuts me off. "My boy would not say anything like that. You were probably playing and you took it way too seriously." "Ma'am, I could be walking down the hall and they would shout at me. That's not playing." "Well, maybe you were wearing too revealing clothes. You probably asked for it." My jaw drops at this point. I am 12, lady. What the hell are you talking about? Every day I would have fights with my brother because I kept on stealing his XXL Slipknot t-shirts and going to school in them. I went to class looking like I'm wearing a tent every day. I look behind me for my mother, but the teacher says, "No, you just talk it out. We'll talk to your mother after." Look, I wasn't asking for anything. I'm just hurt and I want this to stop. "Listen, we all know you're friends with our boys and we are not stupid. Maybe you shouldn't play around with them and try to seduce them and your problems would go away." I start getting tears in my eyes from anger because Karen really thinks me playing Hunger Games with his son is me trying to seduce him in 6th grade. Then one of the other moms finally steps in. "Look, OP, I have a daughter. I know this must hurt and I will talk to my boy about it. I think he's in the wrong too," implying that somehow I am too, "and I'll make him stop calling you names." This was kind of nice of her, and the 3rd mom agreed as well. Now it was only me versus Karen. She started yelling about how her boy did nothing wrong, and maybe if I was friends with the girls, I wouldn't get called names. Newsflash, Karen, the girls called me names as well. Finally, my mom had enough and stood up and said, "Get out, OP." I went out to wait with the boys since the teacher didn't invite them in, only me to deal with their mothers. I cried during the whole way home in the car because of how humiliated I felt. To this day, I don't know what what my mother said to them, but they all stopped after that, and we became good friends again in 8th grade, when they were a lot more grown up about girls in general. I hated my teacher since then. I could never understand how she thought this was okay. I'm 19 now, so I bring this up only to laugh, but it really screwed up my self-esteem as a teenager. So that's what happens when you get a teacher that doesn't give a crap at all about her students, when she's kind of forced to care. Yeah, that's horrible. I'm glad it got better though. That's all I can say. Kids are dumb. So are teachers, sometimes. And parents. Everyone's dumb. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.